Welcome everyone. Today we're going to explore what actually pushes firms beyond borders. Global business is not accidental. It is driven by force that reshapes industries, consumer behavior and competition. Think of this session as answering one central question. Why companies go global? Global business refers to cross-border economic activity, which involves goods, services, capital, and knowledge. As of 2024, global trade exceeds $32 trillion. Over 60% of world GDP is linked to international activity. Even small firms now operate globally via digital platforms. So globalization is no longer a strategy, which is only reserved for big companies or capital intensive companies or large companies. It is becoming a default condition for all the companies, whether it could be medium, micro, small, or large. So is there any business today that is purely local? Think. Here you see how the Mini Cooper is made using a global supply chain. This is a perfect example of how modern businesses operates across multiple countries. At first glance, this looks like a British car, but in reality, it's a global product managed by BMW. So here in this picture, you can see the design and research happens for Mini Cooper in United Kingdom and Germany. This country is specialized in innovation and high-end engineering. Engine production or engine is produced in Austria. Austria is known for its precision manufacturing. Interior components like seats and dashboards come from Poland and Czech Republic. The electronics comes from South Korea and Japan, which, as we already know, these countries lead in semiconductors and technology. The infotainment screens are manufactured in China, which has a strong capabilities in mass production and to produce cheaper prices. Body components, the steel components or body parts are from Spain. The final assembly is made in Oxford, United Kingdom, where the Mini Cooper factory brings all components together. So this entire process is called global value chain. Each country contributes based on its strengths. This is known as comparative advantage. So this also means countries are independent, or it's not independent, the countries are interdependent. If one country stops production, the entire supply chain can be affected. So next time when you see a car or any automobile or any product, remember it's not made in one place. Mostly it's a result of global collaboration. So global business operates on two fundamental pillars: globalization of markets and globalization of production. These are deeply interconnected. Globalization of markets, which is of demand side. Let us start with markets. So what is market? Which is mostly related to demand side. So we are seeing an increasing convergence across countries. Same brands, Apple, Coca-Cola, Netflix, similar expectations, quality, design, and experience. So this reflects what the great scholar Levitt in 1983 has described as a global market convergence. But convergence is never perfect. Netflix localizes content, McDonald's adapts menus, Tata sells different cars in India and global markets. So firms constantly make a strategic choice: how much to standardize versus how much to adapt. That is the major decision a company should take here with respect to globalization of markets. Whereas in right hand side, if you see, there is another pillar, which is globalization of production, which is of supply side. Now let's move to the production, which connects to the supply side. Production is geographically distributed here with respect to global business. For example, engineering in Germany, components in Asia, assembly in India or Mexico for a mobile phone brand, or it could be an automobile. So this is a rise of global value chain. Firms design production systems globally to optimize cost. Also, the optimization is not limited to only cost, it is also expanded towards quality, speed. So this is not just operations, it is a strategic configuration. So this is the most important idea, that is interdependent. Markets and productions are interdependent mostly. So global demand shapes what companies produce. Global production shapes how competitively companies deliver. So they reinforce each other continuously. For example, take a car. The design is happening in Germany, electronics in Japan and Korea, assembly in India. So one product, multiple geographies, one integrated system. So the supply side and the demand side. The demand side, as you know, it's related to markets are converging. Supply side, production is fragmenting. So this tension defines modern global strategy, isn't it? So what we are supposed to think and answer in this scenario is, if markets are becoming similar but production is becoming more distributed, what kind of global strategy should firm adopt? So you can comment your answers here. So successful global firms do one thing exceptionally well. They align where they sell, how they produce. So both pillars are extremely important. So global business is not choosing only markets or production. It's about integrating both into a coherent system. So far we have looked at globalization through different lenses, that is technology, markets, production. Now let's step back and simply simplify everything into one powerful mode. Globalization is not driven by a single factor, it is powered by two engines working together, that is majorly political shift and technological revolution. So how political shift has become an important engine. Let's start with the first engine, that's your political engine. After World War II, countries systematically reduced economical barriers. They have liberalized trades across countries. Formation of many institutions like WTO, BRICS, free trade agreements. This has reduced what we call an economic walls. So this was a deliberate policy designed by government. So this was not an automatic thing. Due to the circumstances, it was a deliberate policy to integrate economies across the world. Without this, globalization would have remained limited. Let us discuss on engine 2, technological revolution. This is the second engine. So it is related to innovation in technology, which includes fields like transportation, communication, and digital infrastructure, where you see it has, these sectors have dramatically reduced cost, time, distance with the help of technology. So technology shrinks the world. The multiplication effect of these two engines is, these two engines do not act independently, they amplify each other. Political openness enables technology to spread. Technology makes globalization more valuable and scalable. Together they create a multiplier effect. The result of this interaction is that what we see today, a hyper-connected global market. Firms operate across borders seamlessly. supply chain spans across the continents, that is more around the world. Consumers access global products instantly. So this forces reshuffled global business completely. They did not add to globalization. They transformed its scale and speed. Now think about this. If one engine weakens, it could be a political support. Maybe a party might lose its government in a country. So if the political support declines, what happens to globalization? So globalization depends upon both political environment and technology capacity. Firms must navigate both, not just one of the engines. So globalization is inevitable. It is sustained by the continuous interaction of these two engines. Now let's see how in detail this first engine of globalization, and which is one of the which is mostly underestimated. So to discuss in detail, let's understand the political architecture. At first glance, globalization feels like a neutral process, markets expanding, companies growing. But when you look closely, you realize something important. This wasn't designed like breaking the wall. Take a look at this picture here. This wall represents tariffs and quotas. Basically, barriers that made international trade difficult and expensive. For a long time, countries protected their own industries, like big, especially the countries, large countries, capital intensive countries, or developed countries. They protect their own industries by keeping these walls high. So global businesses has limited, fragmented, and it's risky. Earlier, because of this tariffs or restrictions, which is politically aligned. But now you see a conscious strategic shift since few decades. So here is a turning point. Advanced economies, especially Western nations, made a deliberate strategic decision by lowering this wall. This wasn't accidental, it was calculated move. That's expand trade. Increase economic growth, build interdependence between nations. So globalization begins with an intent, not with respect to inevitability. So if you see the bridge here, it's a bridge is an institutional framework. Now look at what replaces the wall. That's a bridge. At the center of this bridge is the World Trade Organization. This represents something critical, right? A global rule book. So WTO is creates policy to enhance this rule book. It standardizes how trade happens. So what are the common rules? Dispute resolution mechanism, predictability in international transitions or transactions. So instead of chaos, now countries have structure. So from barrier to rules, this shift is very powerful. Trade depends on politically like no trade dependent on political uncertainty before. Now trade operates within an agreed frameworks, isn't it? So that transition from barriers to rules is what enables scale. So how is this impacting business? And so this leads to the most important question: whether the countries are really getting benefit out of it, or few countries are getting benefit. So if you see in Europe, the policies are mostly aligned to European countries, and they do a lot of businesses as an European Union. When compared to other countries, they're not getting benefit. It could be developing country, poor countries. It could be Asian continent or African continent. So what does this mean for companies? The answer is simply simple but profound. Firms can now plan long term with organizations invest across borders, by build global supply chains. So all with greater uncertainty and lower risk. And in business, certainty is everything. So this system works only when countries trust and follow the rules. So globalization here depends upon cooperation, stability, and policy alignment, which means it can also shift if these conditions change. So what happens? What is happening within Iran, America, China, Taiwan, India, Russia? It's all based on this political architecture, isn't it? So if countries start raising trade barriers again, global institutions like WTO weaken. So what happens to global business? Supply chains, market access, investment decisions. That's the fragility built into the systems as well. So here is the key takeaway from this engine 1 discussion. So globalization is not just economic, it's a political at its core, isn't it? And firms that understand this don't just track markets, they track policies, agreements, and geopolitical shifts. So let's take everything what we have discussed: global supply chain, distributed production, mini multinationals. So if you take an example of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, it represents something very important. The apex of global coordination. This is not just an aircraft, it's a global system brought together into a one product. Let's look how this plane is actually built. Wings and main fuselage is made from Japan. Rear fuselage is made in Italy. Doors are manufactured in Sweden and France. Final assembly is happening in the United States. So what you're seeing here is one product built across multiple countries by specialized experts. So this model gives us a clear logic. So how each part is produced, where the expertise is strongest, instead of doing everything in one place. So the company coordinates the best capabilities globally, so that they can produce best products with best quality at a cheaper price. So this is a shift from traditional thinking. Earlier firms focused on control and ownership. Now firms focuses on coordination and integration, because values come from selecting the right partners from right countries, managing complexity, ensuring everything fits together perfectly. So what's the real challenge with this kind of products? Here, building parts globally is one thing, integrating them seamlessly is another. So timing, quality, communication is a challenge. Everything has to align precisely. Even a small delay in one country can disrupt the entire system. So the real capacity here is to just manufacturing. It is not just manufacturing. It is a kind of building a symphony with respect to firms, like firms which are designing, managing, synchronizing networks that spans continents. So if you had an access to best supplier in the world, could you actually coordinate them effectively because access is easy? So here is the key thing which you should remember. Competitive advantage today comes from how well you integrate your global capabilities. Let us take an example of how India is managing oil prices nowadays. It's because India's communication, India's supply chain is more stronger than other countries. So we have the Indian government has not increased substantially the oil prices. They are able to buy oil from Iran, oil from Russia, oil from North America. So they're managing with respect to even today by practice, like now having a policy of non-alignment, politically building a better relationship with almost all the countries in the world. So you keep this example or remember this example to understand how basic modern global strategy is less about location and more about how you connect the world into one system. So what is globalization? Think about globalization as a spectrum. On one extreme, total fragmentation, countries completely isolated. On the other extreme, a perfectly flat world, isn't it? No barriers at all. Privileged countries. Reality, somewhere in between, there is a flat world. So there is a strong temptation to believe that technology has removed all barriers and created a flat world. That distance doesn't matter with respect to technology. So for being like using the technology, the border don't matter, but in practice they still do, and they influence business decisions every single day. What is that still create differences even in highly connected world? Several forces continue to shape outcome, like national policies and regulations, cultural preferences, language differences, regional economic conditions. So while firms can operate globally, they cannot control or they cannot operate identically everywhere. So they have to customize, though they have to build balance between integration and adaptation. So this creates a fundamental tension in global strategy. So how much companies should integrate globally? How much they have to adapt locally? There is no universal answer for this. It depends upon whether the company how much they are aligning with respect to the industry, market, product. So for firms, this means that one thing, like global strategy must be nuanced. The companies cannot assume what works in one country will work in another. What success globally will automatically succeed locally. Instead, firms must constantly adjust. So if the world is only partially global, how should companies design their strategies? Should they standardize more, adapt more, and how do they decide? The world is neither fully global or fully local. It's semi-global. Let's understand the basic fact. It's semi-global. And what does it mean? Here, the success comes. So it's like with total with with in between the total fragmentation and the total and the flat world. And success comes also from understanding whether integration creates value, where integration creates value, and where adaptation is necessary. So thinking of globalization, we can assume it's like a pendulum. It doesn't move in a straight line. Sometimes it moves towards integration, greater integration. Sometimes back towards more closed markets. So what are the forward forces which affects global business? Like what pushes globalization forward? So forward forces includes technology, trade agreements, digital connectivity. They make it easier for firms to expand globally, coordinate across countries, across borders, reach new markets. So these forces pull the pendulum towards integration. So what are the backward forces? At the same time, where the forces are pulling in the opposite direction, political events, economic crisis, global disruptions like pandemics. So these forces are creating uncertainty, restrictions, policy changes, and they push the pendulum back towards fragmentation. So globalization is not a straight path. It expands, it slows down, sometimes it even reverses direction. So firms create a very different strategic challenge here. The companies cannot assume markets will always remain open. Supply chain will always function smoothly. Instead, firms must prepare for both expansion and disruption. So strategies when companies build, it should be adaptive. So companies also should understand if globalization can move backward, what kind of strategy should be used? Like how should firms design their global operations? Should they concentrate on one region or diversify across regions or concentrate in one particular product? So there's no simple answer, but the question is very critical. So globalization could be understood as a dynamic, not permanent, and successful firms are not just globally integrated. They are resilient to change. In global business, the winners are not only those who assume stability, but those who plan for movements. Now we arrive at the most important question of this entire discussion. After understanding global drivers, power shifts, like semi-globalization, multinationals, so what firms actually do? Strategy is a balance. Here what you can see is how companies capture the core challenge of modern global strategy. On one side in the graph, so you can see going global, that's on y-axis, and on the other side staying local on the x-axis. So you see a chart here, right? The success lies somewhere in between. The two strategic pulls which are making companies to build strategies here. So going global allows firms to scale operations, reduce costs, access large markets, but at the same time, staying local allows firms to adapt to culture, meeting local preferences, navigating regulations effectively. So both forces matter here. And they often pull into different directions. So the company should look for a sweet spot. Now look at the center of this framework. That's a sweet spot, right? Sweet spot, right? This is where firms leverage global efficiencies while adapting to local realities. And this position is not fixed. It shifts, depends upon the industry, market conditions, and competitive dynamics. So if you ask, there's no perfect formula for us building a strategy. So two firms, the same industry, might choose very different positions, and both can succeed because strategy is about alignment, not limitation. So if you connect what we previously discussed, that is semi-globalization tells us the world is mixed, pendulum tells us conditions keep changing, so the sweet spot today may not be the sweet spot tomorrow. So for leaders like you, this means that strategy cannot be static. Firms must continuously reassess, adjust their global local balances, and respond to shifts in technology and policy. So this is an ongoing process. Yesterday's strategy may not work today, but on one time decisions is not relevant for organizations. So you have to think here as if you become a leader of an organization, is your strategy flexible enough to move with change? Is it rigid enough that change will disrupt it? So success in global business is not about choosing a global or local, it's about mastering the balance between the two.